to see. Sail home, sweet home, where the ships must go to get all cleaned up and put away.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. It is Dakota, that's me, from Galt Advocacy, and I'm joined by no one. I'm all by myself today. And we're gonna be talking about IHSS as we usually do, about share of cost, which is a bit of a specific situation for some people. You know, maybe this information may not be for everyone, but you may know someone, if you see this, who does have a share of cost or thinks that they might, and this information could be good for them. So hopefully this will be informative at the very least. And if some people have questions that are related, we might go over some similar related topics as well. It looks like we already have several people that are here. I'm gonna just say hi, hello, welcome, thank you for being here. I'm just gonna assume that that's not a name, but hello, welcome. Glad to have you. Yeah, so we are going to be talking about IHSS share of cost. I do want to briefly, as we usually do, announce our upcoming seminar, just for people who haven't been here before and don't know about it. We've got 2 seminars coming up at the end of April. Free seminars, completely free. And it's going to be in Southern California. First one is in Orange County on the 25th, and the second one is in Glendale on the 26th, and that is a Saturday and a Sunday of April. And they're both going to be at 2 o'clock, right? 2 o'clock on that Saturday and Sunday. And if you sign up ahead of time on our website, when you show up, you're going to get a Amazon gift card, $25. So we just want to let you know about that. We're going to be talking about all things special needs, IHSS, Regional Center, Special Education. Do we do adoption assistance there as well? I don't remember. I think we have a adult and aging sort of section as well. So we try to cover everything. So yeah, I just wanted to let people know about that. Johnny, thank you for being here. Happy Friday. And Teresa put the link to those seminars. So if you're in Southern California and you want to make it out, sign up ahead of time. Like I said, doing a $25 gift card, so that should at least cover your gas. And I think there's parking, but I think one of them, the parking is free, and the other one we get a discount or something like that. So, all right. Now, I know the topic today is probably going to be not as relevant for a lot of people, because a lot of people in IHSS, or at least a lot of our clients, don't have a share of cost. But if we get through it and we've got plenty of time for other things, we can maybe answer some other questions, talk about other things related to IHSS or whatever. So I'm just going to start into it. And if people have questions about it while we're going, or questions about other things, go ahead and post them in the comments whenever you want. So share of cost. This is something that affects only a certain portion of IHSS recipients, and it's all based on how you get Medi-Cal. IHSS is a benefit of Medi-Cal. You have to have Medi-Cal in order to get it. And some people who are on Medi-Cal are over a certain income threshold. So I think the regular threshold for income is something like 20,000, or is that the threshold for anyone? I don't know. But there's an income threshold for Medi-Cal where if you're below it, then you get full scope Medi-Cal, everything is covered, and you don't have any share of costs with Medi-Cal. But if you're above it and you are still within the range that you can get it, but you don't have it, it's not fully covered because you still have, a job, you're working part-time, your income's over a certain level, then you might get a share of cost with your Medi-Cal, and that is also applied to IHSS. there was one example that was given. I don't know how accurate this is, but we read one example that said, like, you might have a $200 share of cost, but others say that it could be closer to like 500, right? It really varies depending on person to person. And this essentially is a percentage of your IHSS, or a dollar amount of your IHSS, that you, as the recipient, that's the person with the disability that is receiving the help, you as the recipient have to pay that amount to your provider before the county will pay anything. Now, I say before, but it's a little bit different how it's implemented. But that's essentially what it means. It is an amount that the recipient who is getting the help has to pay to their provider. Now, the thing about this share of cost is that it changes every month. If you do have a share of cost, it changes every month based on how much you have already used your medical coverage. This is where it can get kind of weird. So let's say, for example, you have a $200 share of cost, right? So at the end of the month, or at the end of the pay period, it's every 2 weeks that you pay your recipient, or you pay your providers. So you have a $200 per 2 week share of cost. Then if during that month you go to the hospital and you have to pay a share of cost for the hospital visit, you have to pay $50 there. Or you have a surgery or an appointment, or you have to do a prescription, and each one of those things you pay $50 here, you pay $20 there, you pay $30 there. All of that cuts down how much you have to pay your provider out of your own pocket. So if your total was $200, but you paid a total of $120 over the course of those 2 weeks for other medical expenses, then when it comes time to pay your provider, the county will only require you to pay $80, and they'll pay the rest, all of whatever else the provider earned in that month. So it's I believe the examples we said say, think of it like insurance deductible, where it's like you have a certain amount that you have to pay out from Medi-Cal, and if you don't pay it out through other things, then it goes to your IHSS. But if you pay all of it, if you have a lot of medical expenses, you have an appointment and therapy and physical therapy, surgery, and you've already paid down your share of costs, then you don't have to pay anything to your provider out of your own pocket. The county will cover all of it. I think Teresa gave us some numbers here as to okay, so this is the limits to qualify at all. And I think it's a number lower than these, where the cutoff is for whether you'll have no share of cost or some share of cost. So, yeah, I think for a single person, I think it's on here where it's like for an individual, for one person, it's something about 20,000, 21,000 per year. I can barely. I'm drowning under this comment. Yeah, so it's about 21,000 per year for one person to qualify for Medi-Cal, and then in between that and $0 is where the share of costs starts. So let me see. So the reason why a lot of IHSS recipients don't have a share of cost is that usually when they have, a severe disability, they need IHSS, they're not able to work. And a lot of these a lot of alternative income sources aren't counted for Medi-Cal, right? If you're not working, if you're disabled, oftentimes your income won't be counted against you, whatever you have. And there are other ways that a person can have their work income not counted. For example, there is I think it's the Working Disabled program, where you can still earn an income and that won't be counted against your Medi-Cal. There's also a program of IHSS that doesn't have any sheriff cost no matter what. That's the Community First Choice Option, or CFCO. You might have heard us talk about that before. And it is only for those who are very severely disabled and need what they call a nursing level of care. So those who have very severe physical disabilities or who are who need protective supervision, and typically they're not going to get enough income to have a sheriff cost anyway. But those are some ways that you can also avoid having a sheriff cost through IHSS. I'm gonna finish my thought and then I'll get to your question, Johnny. All right. One other thing to keep in mind about the sheriff cost is how it affects multiple providers. If you have multiple providers, it's not going to be up to you, the recipient or the provider. You guys don't determine where that sheriff cost is going to lie, like who you're going to pay directly to and who the county is going to pay to. The county will tell you each pay period how much the recipient has to cover and who they have to pay it to. So it's just a thing that they calculate. I think it's based on which provider submits their time card first. They're the ones going to have the sheriff cost applied to their hours. All right. Let me get your question. Johnny, you said, hi, Dakota. For IHSS annual renewal, is the time interval always 12 months? For example, if we got approved in July, will the next annual visit be in July the next year? We hope to plan our time for getting documents ready beforehand. It should be. I'll say that. It should be every 12 months. That's the plan. I know in our county here in Sonoma County, they actually, to avoid going over their deadline, because they have a deadline where it says they have to do it every 12 months. And for specific cases, especially protective supervision cases, they can actually be charged a fee. The county can be charged a fee if they go beyond 12 months. So our county here, they actually put in a new policy where they actually want to do the assessment every 10 months. And so it will just constantly be getting earlier and earlier in the year. But officially, it's every 12 months. Now, if you're not on CFCO, which was the program I just mentioned, which most protective supervision cases will be on CFCO, but if for some reason you're not, then they have the option of doing it later. They could do it anywhere between 12 and 18 months, but in most cases, they're going to do it in 12 or less, especially if you have PS. So that's the plan. Oftentimes they are late. That does happen where they are just late in doing the assessment, but that's not really a problem for you. For you, you should expect that it will be around the same time every year. That's what would be normal. Okay, Teresa provides with some more context. So going to share this. If your income is below, she posted up, and I think they're only posted. Hopefully, if you are on Facebook, you can check that, or I can put it back on screen if anyone needs to see it. So if your income is below those levels, you'll generally pay $0, and then up to $21,000 or $29,000 for a couple. And so I think can still get. Oh, okay. So I'm not sure.
Those initial numbers were 0. You get 0 free.
Okay, let me just put them back up. So these numbers are going to be where if you're below this, then you're going to have $0 sheriff cost, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're below these numbers, you're going to have $0 sheriff cost. If you're above these numbers but still below these numbers, then you can still get Medi-Cal, but with a sheriff cost. That's our understanding. Okay.
That's the way it says on DCHS. DHCS.
Now, she says that's from DHCS. They're like, that's the government entity that runs the whole program, so they should know their information. They have good information. Let me I see there's a question from Hilda on YouTube. I will get to that after I follow up with Johnny. So said, what's CFCO? So I can briefly talk about this. CFCO is one of several basically sub programs of IHSS. So in-home supportive services is the main program, and it's all run the same way, but is funded through a few different Medi-Cal sub-programs. So one of those is CFCO, which is Community First Choice Option. Yeah, that's it. And this is the preferred program for anyone who has a significant level of need, because this program gets more funding from the federal government than the others. So if you're not on CFCO, then the state and the county have to pay a little bit extra. But if you're on CFCO, then you get more money from the federal government. And so the counties, whenever possible, want to put people on CFCO if they can. But there is a certain bar you have to meet to be on it. And it has the added benefit, problem, whatever it is, that like I said, if the counties don't do their assessment after 12 months, then they have to pay a fee. They essentially have to pay that extra, the extra that the federal government paid them. They have to pay part of that back. So when you're on CFCO, they really don't want to be late, because the other programs, there's a few others that have, some slight differences about them. They all mostly provide the exact same services, but the funding's a little bit different. But the other ones, if they're late in doing their assessment, if they go past 12 months, there isn't really a penalty for them, right? Not like CFCO. They don't have to pay the federal government. They don't have to pay the state. They just they get a slap on the wrist and that's it. There's not really a big, it's not really a big follow-up to that.
Explain how they get around the 12-month cycle.
So this is a thing, and I'm hoping that this is, actually, I don't think it's really been addressed so far, but there is something that has been going on, and Teresa reminded me to mention this, that because CFCO has a hard deadline that the counties can receive a penalty. Actually, currently it's the state that receives the penalty, but the state is now pushing that onto the counties, so that's going to be changing. Some counties have gotten a policy or a practice where if they're in danger of going past the deadline, what they'll oftentimes do is that they will contact you like the week before the deadline, like the very last time, and they'll say, hey, we have to do the assessment tomorrow, so hope you're home. You better be. And when people say, no, I can't do it tomorrow, I need time to like get prepared and to get my advocate there, and I don't have any of the paperwork and all that, and I'm working that day, my kid's in school, I'm not going to be home. They'll say, oh, you're refusing to do the assessment? Well, then we're just going to terminate your case and you can reapply. And they do that because they'll say, like, well, we have to do this week, so if you can't do it by this week, sorry, we have to terminate your case. And they do that to try to avoid the deadline. Now, this is ridiculous because the whole point is, it's literally written into the law. It says the county must assess CFCO cases every 12 months because they are the most vulnerable and the most needy recipients of IHSS. So to ensure that they get adequate care and the most services that they can, they must be assessed every 12 months. And so the county says, perfect, we've got a solution to make sure that we don't go past 12 months. We're just going to terminate them from the program entirely. It's terrible, but I find it so ironically funny that their solution, it's like the letter of the law is you have to do the assessment every 12 months. The spirit of the law is make sure these people get their services. And the county's solution is we'll just remove all of the services. That way there's no breach of the deadline. Okay, let me go back because I saw there was another question. Let me go back to I think it was Hilda said, want to find out about paramedical, and you had a couple follow-ups here. Want to find out if I already have paramedical service hours, but I'm going to need more. Okay, I think there's one more follow-up here as well. Question is, if I already have some paramedical services hours and I will be needing more, will that affect the ones I have already, or can I get more without affecting the ones I have? Well, it depends on how you go about it. So you probably already know, because you've gone through some of this already, that to get paramedical service hours, your medical provider, whoever ordered the service, has to put it down on the IHSS paramedical form. That's the SOC 321. And that's SOC as in state of California, not SOC as in share of cost. They use the same acronyms. It can get confusing. But the SOC 321 form is the paramedical form. And you have to have the doctor fill out exactly what services are needed, how long it takes, how frequently it's done, and how long this will be needed. If you want more, you're going to need a new form, right? You can't just ask for more. You can't just, argue for more. It has to be a new form from the doctor with either an increase in the hours for the tasks you already have, or new tasks that weren't on the last one. The thing about it is, well, for one thing, it has to be a paramedical task, right? If it's something like bathing or social care or transportation or things that aren't considered paramedical by IHSS, then the county can just ignore it. They don't have to go by any of that. But if it is a real paramedical task, you'll probably want to make sure that when you submit the new one, that it also has all of the previous tasks that you already are getting hours for, right? So can it affect your hours? I would say if the social worker wanted to take the new form and say, oh, this is the new hours, and it only has the things that you wanted to add, then they might take away the ones that are not on the list anymore. They'll say, well, all these tasks that you were doing previously, they're not on the list anymore, so we're not going to do those. We're going to take those off and put these new ones on instead. But if you want to get new hours and make sure to keep the ones you already have, I would have the doctor replicate the old one and then add the new ones underneath. That way you keep all the previous hours and you get the new tasks, whatever they may be. If you have more questions about what does count as a paramedical task, we can go over that. I know we're off of our main topic, but I figured this would be a short one anyway. Johnny had another question. Said, also our child's IEP is coming up. What are some key phrases that are accurate and effective to use in the IEP, and what phrases should be avoided in the IEP? Ooh, that's a big one. But I know I'm going to try and think back to all the times I've heard Myra do her seminars. And if you're in the area for our seminars, this will be a great time to ask a lot of these questions as well. One thing that I always hear, and I think this is just a general good practice for a lot of things, but for the IEP, Myra always uses this phrase, prior written notice. You've heard this one all the time, right? Prior written notice. She always says that whenever they say they will do something or won't do something, or there's a promise of, oh, we'll make sure to watch this or watch them, or no, we can't provide that. She always says, ask them to put it in prior written notice so that it's in writing what they are agreeing to do or not do. And then you can challenge it if you disagree, or if you do agree, that you can hold them to it, that they will actually do it. That's one thing. It's not a magic phrase. Like, I don't, she mentions that one a lot, but I don't think it's like, oh, that's just not going to magically get you whatever you want. But you are ensuring that you at least have solid, concrete evidence of what they were agreeing to, so that if there is a problem in the future, that's essentially a contract, right? Whatever's in the IEP is a contract. So if they put it in writing that they will do it, then they need to be held to that, right? Another thing is that you can record the IEP ahead of time, as long as you tell them. I think you have to give them 24 hours in advance. You have to let them know, but you can record it. And what's good, well, I don't know if it's necessarily good for the IEP itself, but what's good for your IHSS is that if you can have discussions with the IEP team about some of the behaviors and whatnot that are relevant for IHSS, and they talk about some of those things happening at school, then having that in a recording is extremely helpful for IHSS, but in some ways it's helpful for the IEP as well. I mean, I don't know about what should be avoided. I would say avoid just going along. Like, if they tell you that, for one thing, if they tell you that goals are being met or being partially met, then you need to look, double check their math there and say, like, what this is, because they might say it's being met, but they might be a little bit like, well, you kind of, fudge the numbers a little bit. Or if they say partially met, that really is a failure, right? If they're not meeting their goals, then the school is supposed to increase your services to make sure they not only meet the goal that they failed, but also progress further to where they should be by now, right? I have seen in some IEPs where there is some tricky language used that seems like it could do, makes it look like goals are being progressed better than they are, really. Where it's like, oh, the so-and-so is able to, usually, like Myra, every time she gives an example, she says Johnny, but since you're Johnny, I don't want to say Johnny. Jimmy, yeah, we'll say Jimmy. Jimmy had 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 situations with 2 or 3 prompts, and it was a yes or no question. And it's like, well, okay, you started with 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 tests, so now we've done 80 times 80 to get down to like 65% accuracy with 2 or 3 prompts on a yes or no question. Well, if you had to be prompted 2 or 3 times to get the right answer, what even is the accuracy at this point, right? So you get these things where like, oh, 80%, that's great. But then you look at like all of the caveats, and it's like, okay, so it's actually more like 20% accuracy, which is the inverse of what you said it was. So I don't know. That's just the kind of thing where there's a temptation for the school system, rather, to, when they fail a goal, to say, oh, well, we were most of the way there, or it was partially completed, let's just continue the same goal and continue the support as it was. But I know Myra would tell you every time, if they didn't meet the goal, that means the county has to do more. It means they have to put in more work and give you more support so that you meet that goal and meet whatever goal you should have been onto this coming year, right? Because if you just set the same goal again, then you're not really progressing at the rate that the child should have been. If you have more specific questions, I think Teresa might have posted something as well in there. Yeah, she's putting in some other good information, so we'll move on. Mona said, what we do in this case if we are not available? I believe this is going back to the comment I was talking about for when the county is coming out at 12 months and they are insisting that it has to be done right away. Essentially, you can put your foot down. If the county says we have to do it tomorrow or else we're going to have to terminate your case, put your foot down and say, no, we're not available, and you cannot terminate the case just because because you chose a day all of a sudden, and that we're going to be, doing other things. This is our assessment, and be a little bit, I don't know what term I should use, but like, be assertive. And if they say, well, fine, we're just going to terminate your case, let them terminate your case. If you go to a hearing, like as soon as you get that notice, it says your case is terminated, file for a hearing, ask for aid paid pending. That's important. File for a hearing immediately and ask for aid paid pending so that you keep your hours. And there is no way, like every single hearing officer we have ever worked with, they're going to call you up on the phone. They're going to be like, all right, so what's the issue? And you're going to say, the issue is the social worker said we had to do the assessment this very day, and I was out of town, or I was working that day and I couldn't get the day off, so I couldn't do it. And they're saying, okay, we'll reschedule. We'll fix it. And if for some reason they go before a judge, you just tell the same thing to the judge, and the judge is going to look at the county and say, what do you mean you gave them 1 day's notice and you were not willing to reschedule? Fix it. So we have never, ever lost a case like that when they actually did try to terminate the hours. But like I said, ask for aid paid pending when you request the hearing so that your hours will continue until the hearing is resolved. Rosita says, hello. Hello. I'm sorry if anyone was really excited about the share of cost topic. I'm sorry we've gotten so far off, but I'm sure I have like one more thing I wanted to say about it at least. So we'll get back to it in a bit. I just want to make sure I cover everyone else's questions. And yet Teresa posted a few more things on Facebook for the IEP, things like that. So you can check those out. Marquette says, I just got here. What's an IEP? That is individualized education plan. And that is when you have a child who has special needs and they're in the school system. It is essentially the plan of action between the school and the parents of how they're going to best support this child in meeting their education goals. It can have a whole bunch of things. It's essentially the contract between the school and the parents of what they're going to do to meet the goals and what the goals are. Sorry. Is this also related to the IEP? Is this one? Yeah, okay. This is also related to the IEPs. Alicia said, yes, always give notice to record 24-hour notice. Make sure, yeah, I believe that's 24 hours is right. Make sure information is being recorded accurately and never sign the IEP at your meeting. They will pressure you. That is a good one as well. Is that the IEP is going to be 20-something pages, and it's very dense with information. So take it home, look over it, have maybe another knowledgeable person. If you have an advocate, or someone who is closely involved in the school system, another parent who's been doing it for years and years, have someone look it over with you and say, is this really what we want? Do we want to agree to all this? All right. For IHSS, are we allowed to travel out of state to visit family? If so, when we notify the IHS worker, do we have to inform? I know. Inform exactly what where we're going. Thanks. Technically, I don't think you even need to notify the worker as long as you are back within 30 days. However, I think it's generally good practice to do so. Where exactly you're going, if you're within the United States, I don't think it matters to them or anyone. The rule of it is, and this is off the top of my head, so I could be getting some of the details wrong, but I believe it's as long as you are back in California within 30 days, there's no problem at all. Because if you are the provider and you're going with the recipient and you're providing protective supervision while you are gone, then you can continue claiming your hours, no problem. And as long as you're back within 30 days, then no issues. You just continue getting your hours like normal. If there is an issue, if there is a problem, and for some reason you are prevented from coming back, like someone gets sick, your plane flight gets canceled, someone's in the hospital while you're gone, whatever. If there's an issue, you can let your county know, and I think they can give you an additional 30 days. Maybe even longer if there's extenuating circumstances, if there's good cause. But I think it's at least another 30 days they can give you to continue receiving your hours and all that. there is a certain point, I think, no matter how much good cause you have, no matter what, I think it's after 6 months that there is no possible chance that you can keep your hours. They will be terminated. But there's a whole complicated set of rules about this, that if you have more, generally, if you follow that rule, 30 days is fine. And if there's extenuating circumstances, 60 days, that'll get you through pretty much any situation. But it gets more complicated if you're going out of the country or other things. I think if you're going out of the country, then it's 30 days, full stop, no exceptions. Hilda said, how can I get someone to help me figure out my hours, because I feel like my caseworker did not calculate them right? But, and the suspense is killing me. But, okay, so, I mean, when it comes to the calculation, if it's you were approved for a certain number of hours and you feel like you're not able to claim that same number of hours, that's a complicated matter, and it could just be that it's because the weeks are divided up a certain way, and that the weekly maximum doesn't quite match the monthly maximum. It's not a perfect, it's not perfect 4 weeks. There's a lot of complicated things that can get into that. But if what you're saying is from what you told the social worker to what you were approved for doesn't feel right, then that's a whole can of worms. But there's a lot of people who could give you advice on whether or not that they think you got the right number of hours. Sorry, my nose is itchy today. This always happens when I get nervous. But I'm not nervous. My nose is just itchy, actually.
It's just spring.
It's just spring, yeah. Now, you were mentioning paramedical hours before. Now, if your thing is about the paramedical hours where you think that the services were not calculated right, then it is important that you could check your check the form that the doctor filled out, and to the best of your ability, calculate those hours, because there is a possibility if those are significantly different from what the doctor wrote is significantly different from what you were actually receiving, that could be several different issues. We have seen it in the past that when you sign a release of information at the assessment, and this is one of the several reasons why we always tell people not to sign the release of information. If you signed it and then you provide them a paramedical form, we have seen counties do this. They'll look at the paramedical form and say, oh, 4 hours a week for all those tasks? We don't think so. We're going to go behind your back without telling you. We're going to go to your doctor. We're going to tell the doctor, hey, doctor, you filled this out wrong. These tasks should only take 5 minutes. Here, do it again. And the doctor goes, oh, well, I guess it only takes 5 minutes. Fills it out, says 5 minutes, gives it back to the county, and the county goes, all right, you're only approved for 5 minutes. And the doctor had originally written half an hour or an hour. We have seen this happen in a few different cases, and they're only able to do that because of the release of information. So if you have a paramedical form and you're like, the doctor wrote an hour and they're only giving me 5 minutes, what's up with that? Then that could be the reason why. Now, it could also be just a division thing. Like if you have a task on the paramedical form that only happens once every other month, then they're going to pay you split up per week, right? So the weekly amount's going to be 5 minutes, because over the course of 2 months, the number of weeks will eventually add up. My math is off, but you get the idea. But that is something you should look up into if it's paramedic related. If it's not paramedical related, then it's really going to be just a matter of opinion, because there's so many subjective things as to what hours you can get. Marcus said, thank you. I think you asked about the IEP. You're welcome. If you have more questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. We've got some time still. Johnny again said, for IHSS, if our travel period will land around the time of the annual renewal home visit, will that cause problems for us? Ooh, somewhat. It could. It would at least be probably problematic for your social worker. I would say what's best, if you have enough time, if you have like, if your planned travel is still a ways away, it would be preferable. I think your social worker would prefer it if you could let them know ahead of time when you're going to be gone, so that perhaps they could schedule the assessment earlier and say, if your assessment's in June or sometime in June, and for 2 out of the 3 weeks, or sorry, for 2 or 3 weeks in that month, you're going to be gone, then maybe you could let them know and they'll say, well, let's do it first week of June. That way it's already over and done with before you leave, or vice versa, after you come back, or maybe they'll want to jump a whole month earlier if you give them enough time. So, like we talked about, there are, there are things you can do about it. It's like, at the end of the day, if you miss the deadline, it's not really your problem, it's their problem. But if you knew that there was an assessment scheduled for that day and then planned to do a vacation afterwards, then they might see that as you intentionally avoiding the assessment. And if a person intentionally avoids their assessments, then they can eventually just be removed from the program. But if you've already had this plan and you let them know ahead of time before a date is set, then it's on them to work around it. So I would say best practice is let them know when you're going to be gone, and then they can plan accordingly. Okay. Lori said, "Hi. How soon after turning in all the required paperwork can we find out how many hours my son qualifies for?" Well, there's going to be a pretty big step in between those. Well, sorry. Let me kind of walk through it. So when you first apply, they're going to send you the most required paperwork is the healthcare certification form. That's the doctor's form, the SOC 873. Once you submit that is technically the only form required to get an assessment, to get IHSS. However, once you've done the assessment, they might ask you for more questions. But the next step after that is the assessment. They show up at your house. You have this whole conversation. It usually takes an hour. You talk about, all of your son's needs, what help you have to give him and all of that. And then during that, they might ask you for SOC 821, the paramedical form, the IEP, the regional center documents. They might ask you for all kinds of things. But generally, in most cases, it's going to be from the day of the assessment, somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, I would say, before you receive the notice telling you how many hours you're going to get. Now, it's not super unusual for it to go longer than 4 weeks, but that is the point where we would probably start reaching out to them and saying, hey, it's been a while since the assessment, is there a problem? Are you missing anything? You still working on it? That's when we would start checking in with them. But I would say 2 to 4 weeks is normal. If it's a reassessment, it'll be on the shorter side. If it's a first-time assessment, it'll probably be on the longer side. All right, that's all the comments that we have right now. I'm going to briefly try and wrap up the share of cost topic that we left behind 30 minutes ago. But if you have any other last-minute comments, we've got about 5 or 10 minutes before I really got to jump off here. So I think one thing, I did mention this already, but I want to go back to this again because this was one thing I thought was pretty confusing, is that when one recipient has a share of cost, but they have multiple providers, it's not split evenly between the providers. The share of cost isn't, and it's not determined by either of them, the recipient and the providers. None of them get to determine who the share of cost is paid to, right? As a refresher, the share of cost is essentially an amount of money that the recipient has to directly pay to their providers for their care. The county will tell you every week how much the sheriff, or every 2 weeks rather, when you do the pay period, how much the sheriff cost is and which provider you have to pay it to. And it could change every week. The last thing I wanted to mention is don't neglect to pay the sheriff cost, right? Even if you and your provider have an agreement, if you're related, your family and whatever, it's like, we're going to, we're kind of sharing this income anyway. It really doesn't matter to us whether the provider gets paid. Just do it anyway, because you could be at risk of like a fraud situation investigation, even if there was like an unspoken agreement between you. It's best if you still pay the sheriff cost, because even if it's not going to help you at all, if the provider just says, well, I'll just work those hours for free, and then just doesn't claim those hours, the sheriff cost will still be applied. You're just losing out on hours at that point. So claim all the hours and just pay the sheriff cost, whatever the amount it is. That's going to be much better than doing something that could get you a mark against your record or a strike with IHSS or anything like that. I think I had it written down somewhere here. That your case could get flagged for review, audited, if the county sees that the provider is not being paid the sheriff cost, because essentially that's work that they're doing without pay, which is a whole big issue for the state. Okay, I think that's the last thing I wanted to mention, unless people have specific sheriff cost questions. So I'm going to get through these last few questions, and then I will head off and we'll toss it over to the Spanish page for our Spanish Live. So a couple last minute questions here. Oh, sorry, a little laggy. Rauer said, is it normal for a social worker to tell you how many hours you're getting through the phone? I've rarely, I would say, I don't think it's unheard of, but there may have been cases, maybe not like the exact number I've had, but I have had times where maybe we were waiting on the notice of action. It was a little late in coming, and so we decided, hey, let's give the social worker a call and see what the holdup is, see what the issue is. And it just so happened they were about to put in the notice of action. They were pretty much just putting a bow on it, or they were wrapping, and over the phone they just happened to say, oh yeah, by the way, you're approved for protective supervision, or yeah, it's gonna be 130 hours or whatever. I've heard of that happening, but not as a replacement for the notice. Like, everyone should be receiving a notice of action in the mail. But if you happen to talk to the social worker around that time, or maybe just as like doing their due diligence, maybe they just like to give their clients a call and just let them know. I mean, maybe if it's good news, they're like, hey, congratulations, you're getting PS or something like that. That could just be a social worker preference thing, or you might have just called them at a convenient time. I wouldn't say it happens to most people, but it's not, like I said, it's not unheard of. And Lori said, first time assessment. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Well, thank you for the comment. Always appreciate getting questions. And if you have any more, we're here every Friday. So yeah, we specialize, especially, I pretty much only deal with IHSS stuff. And most of us here that are online primarily know about IHSS. So if you ever have questions about the program and all that, if you ever go to a hearing, got tons of information about that. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Sorry, I was trying to go back to our, thank you everyone for being here. Take the topic off. Before we go, I will just once again give a shout out to our seminars that are coming up. So I want to, it's what we do every week. That at the end of April, the 25th, Saturday the 25th in Orange County, and Sunday the 26th in Glendale, and that's of April. We're going to be doing 2 free seminars. Both are going to start at 2 p.m. one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And it's going to have Myra, other Myra, Nicole, Michelle, and Lori are all going to be there. And Myra's going to be giving a whole presentation on all things special needs. And if you sign up ahead of time on our website, here's the link for anyone who missed it earlier. If you sign up on our website, when you show up, you will receive a $25 Amazon gift card to hopefully cover gas and parking if there is a charge. And just a way to say thank you for being there and thank you for following us for so long. And yeah, with that, did I see it? I think I might have seen one last comment. My 2-year-old daughter just got approved for IHSS. The social told me she would call me next week to tell me how many hours. Honestly, that's really cool that your 2-year-old got approved for IHSS. That it's not easy for 2-year-olds to get IHSS. So I'm really glad that you got a social worker who was open-minded and reasonable. And the fact they're going to call you, I think that maybe is, I would hope that's good news. Like maybe they want to share with you, hey, good news, you're getting this many hours. I don't know, but we'll see. So that's cool, awesome. So thank you all for being here. And if you speak Spanish, our Spanish advocate's going to be going live in just a few minutes, around 1 o'clock, maybe a little later, and they're going to be talking about the same topic and perhaps answering some other questions as well. So thank you all for being here. We'll be here again next week about another topic, and yeah, see you all next time. Bye-bye.